And we're live. It's back time for New Comic Book Day Book Club.
Hey-o.
We're reading old books tonight. Alec, how you doing, man?
You know.
I don't, actually. That's why I asked, but okay.
Well, I mean, taking out the part of the equation that involves the rest of the world, I'm doing okay.
Right, yeah. Relationship with self versus relationship with world.
Yeah. Or world's relationship with everybody.
So I guess it's a good time to be looking at dystopian futures.
Yeah, I mean, why not? Because look out the window or look in a comic book. It's
right, exactly.
It's like escapism through reality.
Right. We're joined tonight by Justin from KnowGoodComics. How you doing, man?
Hey, what's up, guys? Doing good, man. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on tonight. I'm really excited. You know, I've got some passion for some John Byrne and Clermont goodness, so I'm excited to dive in, man.
And if you guys don't follow Justin, I mean, we talk all the time on Instagram. I feel like I'm always like hitting likes on his posts on Instagram are amazing. But he's got a YouTube channel as well, and I put the link for that in the description below. So make sure you guys check him out, sub him up. He's a big Clermont Byrne, and now he's into House of X. You're starting to read some of those stories. How do you feel about Hickman versus Clermont and Byrne? How are you feeling about how that all goes together for you? Because you've been reading what you said you read almost the first like 60 issues of Byrne, right?
Yeah, so I stopped at 143, and then I jumped over to House of X, and I mean, I love it. I love the new stuff. I've heard some mixed feelings about it. I'm also just really into, I don't know, I feel like I like a lot of things, but ultimately
you're on the wrong show then.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, I really like the direction that Hickman's taken it, and I know it's going to build up into something big. So curious where he takes that.
And there's some fun tie-ins to the Byrne Clermont era as well. Totally. I always really enjoyed that stuff.
Totally.
Let me jump into the chat and say hello to some folks who are here early before we do a deep dive into some Days of Future Past, because that's what we're discussing tonight, if you didn't notice the thumbnail. Ruben Guzman. So I met Ruben at my LCS last week. So nice seeing you in the chat, Ruben. Backseat Driver 5280. Hello to you. You were third. But if that's counting me, that's not really fair. Hialeah Comic Bro made an amazing burger on Sunday. If you didn't catch Silver Age Sundays, that show was delicious to watch. Hello to Comic Man Andy. Haven't seen you in a while, brother. Good to see you around. Superior Hero Reviews. We are talking about some good X-Men books, so hopefully you are excited for that. Let's see. Did I miss Fuchsia? Sorry. Hello, Fuchsia. Oh, and I did miss Gorvidal. Good evening to you, sir. Much appreciated. So we looked at this week, Alec and I, we were like, there is straight garbage this week, or really a lack of garbage in some ways. So we decided
like basically nothing.
Yeah. Right. So Alec was like, why don't we do Days of Future Past? I don't know. What was it that made you think of that idea?
Well, you had just said like maybe we'll do like a classic old story. And I haven't read this in a hot minute, probably maybe even since like college. And it's just one of those things that you should reread every once in a while because it's one of the classic of that era. My first thought was maybe do the Wolverine miniseries, the Frank Miller miniseries.
Right.
But then I didn't want to read 4 comics, so I decided to do a 2-comic run.
Right. Make it easier on yourself.
Yeah, it's what I do best.
And I will say, like, when I first got the Marvel Unlimited app, I started around Giant Size and kind of went through, and I think I got to about issue 101, just before 101, it's probably 100. I was reading through, and then I took a break to read other stuff, and I have not gone back yet. So I probably haven't read this in a few years as well. I don't have this in any kind of a trade. I don't even know that there is like a traditional trade for
them. There definitely, I mean, I don't know if there's a trade. There must be a trade just for it, but there's definitely trades with this in it for sure. Because I've seen it on the cover of trades, the 141 cover.
Right. And I know that Clermont Omnibus is coming. So at the end of July, there's a Clermont omnibus coming. I know this because I put it on my wish list, and my wife bought it for me for Father's Day, birthday. So my first omnibus will be coming at the end of the month, and it's not in that omnibus because it only goes through 130, something like that. But then the second omnibus comes, I think, in November, and it will have this in it. So if you want those giant collected editions, like the Gem Mint style,
He loves those things.
yeah, by Christmas you can get both. You can get it's like the first 70 issues of the Clermont.
And some of them become really collectible too. So
Yeah, they do.
Well, and I know that my girls have only read some of them through Classic X-Men because that's a great run for reading some of these as well. You can find a ton of these in the dollar bins in those Classic X-Men issues, which I almost collect as many of those as I do some other.
We got some great covers by Adam Hughes, Mike Mignola.
They do.
And they add a little bit at the end of each issue that's like new material that connects with that particular issue's storyline. And Classic X-Men 1 is Giant Size X-Men 1. So it basically starts right there. They throw out the early stuff.
Right.
Yeah, who needs it?
Well, speaking of who needs it, Justin, you got a pretty awesome book in the mail today. I feel like before we get started, we kind of need to pay a little homage to this.
Perhaps. Yeah, so as I was just telling you guys earlier, I happened to win a raffle and, had a little luck go my way. It's nice when nice things can happen occasionally. So I was just live on Instagram showing this off before because it came in the mail today. I've been waiting like about a week or so. It finally came in. I was really excited about it. And the box was a little beat up, so I was a little nervous, of course.
Oh, no.
But everything worked out fine. And
oh, my God.
Signed by Stan Lee back in 2012, 2.5 off-white to white. And I never thought I would own this thing, at least not anytime soon. And especially not pay, certainly I'm not going to pay the kind of money that goes for that. So being able to, win it in a raffle definitely took some pressure off for sure.
Wow.
That's a big win.
That is a beauty. Holy cow. How many tickets did you buy? You don't have to worry about money, but how many did you end up buying? Just one ticket or?
Well, in the main, I guess I ended up having 3 tickets, based in from what I won from the minis. I spent about $200 total to get in there. So, you can do the math.
Yeah, I mean, raffle. I've never done raffles. Like I've done Spider-Man booth and mystery boxes and stuff because I feel like at least I'll get something.
Right.
But like clearly that if you hit on a raffle like that book for $200, I do that all day long. But
so the crazy thing is 5 days before I won this raffle, I was actually in another one. And I swear I am pretty new to raffles. And I actually hit another one and I won an X-Men 12. So winning that, it was a 4.5. And winning that, and then literally like less than a week later, winning this, and I'm trying to explain this to my girlfriend, and I'm telling her like, yeah, I won this, $5,000-$6,000 book, and I also got this 500. She's like, yeah, that's fine. Well, let me see the big one though. Let me see the big one. Oh, but this is really good too, Juggernaut. Yeah.
So
it's really good.
Does that mean you're gonna like keep parlaying this luck, or you're like, I'm done. I can't win a third time?
No, so it's funny. Like I thought about when I won the Juggernaut, I was like, all right, let me just leave while I'm ahead, and just keep what I have. I do the occasional sports betting from time to time, and I've been pretty sad that there's been no sports other than what they've had on for like golf. So I happened to throw a couple bucks down on a golfer last week who won, and so I had a little extra money to throw around, and I that was my other mentality of going after this X-Men 1 was if I swing and miss, then it's not necessarily the end of the world. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Hello to PJ and hello to Longbox Diving. Thank you for coming by, and I'm sure Justin will hold that sucker up at least one more time before the night is over.
I'll show it out
because that's a beauty. That is a beauty.
Thank you.
And it's perfectly fitting because we're talking about X-Men tonight. We're talking about what is, I don't know, arguably one of the greatest X-Men stories ever, the Days of Future Past 2-issue comic. What's if you were going to give this a grade, gentlemen, like right off the bat, like what would you give it, Alec?
Oh, don't start with me.
Okay, fine. You want me to go first?
It's your show.
It is not. It's our show on my channel this week. I would say if I was going to give this a grade, I would say it's an A. I mean, I don't know that I want to give out an A plus. I mean, it's dangerously close to being there for me, but it's definitely an A. I love the art style. There are some wordy pages that I'm like, okay, they're definitely doing some of those exposition moments. What is it? I think somebody even says, I know that you know, or I'm sure that you're aware. And then they give like a paragraph of information. There's a couple of those. And then, of course, issue 2 has to like basically give you a couple of page recaps of like the issue right before it. Yeah. They have those little boxes. See last issue or last ish. That kind of stuff. But I mean, I generally always forgive that kind of stuff. If it's in like a series like this where it's on issue 142, there's going to need to like be some of that
references to other things,
right? So I would say A overall. Do you want to go last, Alec?
No, I would say like it's definitely like an A minus for me, just because of like it is wordy AF. Like it, there are just scenes, like there's a whole scene where when Kitty first wakes up in her younger body and they're flying on the plane and she spends like 2 pages explaining to the X-Men what we as the reader already know. Yeah. And it like, I guess like if it was just like in real time as an observer, yes, she would tell them all that. But as the reader,
these pages.
Yeah. I mean, there's like a little bit of new information in those pages, but more or less like we've got it all, and everything else that we don't know, like we gather throughout the rest of the story. Right. So that's the only reason I would give it like that minus grade, is just because I feel like it could have used some like an aggressive editor at times.
Tighter, just tighter.
Yes, tighter. Like just slice some of that fat off.
What about you, Justin?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely up there for me. I told you guys I'm pretty, when I love something, I absolutely love it. And I think that, one of the things you have to kind of consider is, for its time, I think it definitely knocked it out of the park. And anything in that time era, there a lot of it was wordy like that. So
for sure.
Even going
out
into
of the Silver Age, for sure. I mean, I have trouble reading Silver Age books. It's just like exhausting.
Totally. And I mean, I went back and was starting to read some of the early Daredevil stuff, like first 7 issues or whatever, and going from that to Clermont stuff. Like Clermont stuff seems amazing when you're just coming from that.
Well,
you're like, not as many words.
I at the risk of getting just stoned in the chat. Clermont Stanley as writers, like I hate to say it, but he's like, Clermont is a way better writer than Stanley.
Yeah, I would be surprised if people would put Stanley as a better story writer than, or even dialogue or whatever than Clermont. That would be shocking to me that somebody would say the opposite.
Right.
I mean, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but
it's true. We got a couple more people jumping in. Hello to Oregon. Good to see you. Guten Tag. And K. Titus. Konnichiwa. And this kid, I'll tell you. Always jumping into my chats now, Charlie. Hello to you.
But
Clearly
I will say,
a laptop in some other room in my house.
Going back to that, the idea of how wordy it is and the era and all that, we look at this compared to something like the other books that we've read around a similar time, like Nova 1 and New Teen Titans 1. Like, I enjoyed this way more than those.
Oh, yeah. Gore Vidal says that expression at the time didn't bother me. It was commonplace in Marvel and DC, and referencing past issues was also normal and a good thing, especially for new readers. Yeah, and that doesn't really bother me.
It's funny. The one thing that I found funny about one of those kind of past reference things is, when this came out, back issues in comic book stores still like weren't really that big of a thing, right?
Right.
And one of I think it was in 142, there was an asterisk that said, see issue 102. But, like, where is a reader just going to go and pick that up to say, like, oh, let me read this story about Storm and her parents?
You mean you couldn't read that digitally?
Maybe.
Hello, Bear Island, and hey, he agrees with that flaming hot take, and so does TJ the Slab Dragon. Almost, he actually goes a little bit further than you. Almost anyone was a better writer than Stan Lee. Wow.
I mean, I wouldn't disagree. I think like his strengths were in other things other than writing.
Yeah, I mean, obviously character creation and such, depending on how much you want to give him for that,
and marketing and you know, making comics accessible and kind of, you know, building a brand as an advertiser and a marketer. He was an absolute master. But yeah.
So let's get into the story a little bit here. This is clearly a story that has two sort of parallel plots going on simultaneously. We have a future, not a very good one, a somewhat bleak future. There's Kitty Pryde on the first page running through the rubble of New York. I love the lettering, putting the title into the building.
Yeah.
Love that's just beautiful burn stuff there. Mm-hmm. And then the remaining mutants in this Sentinel-dominated New York plotting to send her consciousness back into her younger body, or at least it seems like swapping consciousness, so that I guess the 13 or whatever year old Kitty Pryde is now stuck in her future body, but unconscious for basically the whole story.
Yeah.
And then we've got the mutants that we know in the current timeline dealing with the repercussions of having Kitty come to consciousness in her younger body.
Yep.
Is that pretty much cover it?
One thing I really liked from the get-go is that, you know, I really miss people referring to Wolverine as short.
Yeah.
Short and hairy. He used to get
that's kind of like just gone out the window. Now he's just like a normal sized dude, but used to be like a little shrimpy guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was supposed to be Puck-like.
Yeah, I mean, not quite as short as Puck, but, you know, he's going to like be 5'1", 5'2".
Yeah. Well, Hugh Jackman kind of, you know, screws that all up. He's
like 6'3", yeah.
So issue 1 is a lot of setup, and issue 2 is kind of the payoff. Did you guys feel that way?
Yeah, I think so. You know, just and I must say, when I jumped into this at first, you know, I was worried that I like wasn't understanding something. Look, I'll say I'm very new to X-Men, even still diving into what I've been recently reading. So, you know, I was always worried that like I was going to get to an issue that I'd just be lost and be like, oh man, like, am I supposed to know something and I missed it, or what happened last issue? So this one, when you jump into it, if you just read, you know, a couple prior to that, you know, it certainly opens up, yeah, as you said, in a whole different timeline. And it, you know, made me pump the brakes when I first read it, you know, the first time around, of just like, you know, was I supposed to read an annual or something like that, or, you know, something else?
They dive right in. They don't waste any time. If you had just read the previous issue and then went right into this one, it was very probably jarring, because there's no connection.
Right. It's you know, even though they reference some other issues, it is a standalone story in the X-Men canon of that era.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, in the days of like 1-issue stories, this was a 2-issue story, and then it was done and moved on.
Right, and they had a tiny bit of setup in it was either the issue before that or 2 issues before, where they had the Blob, you know, get rescued or, you know, broke out of jail or whatever. That was the only hint towards kind of what was happening.
Right. Yeah, because they do mention that when you see him with the Brotherhood, the new Brotherhood of Evil Mutants.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something I want to. Go ahead.
And Kirk from Comics on the Mind. Good to see you, brother.
Nice.
I do want to address the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants at some point, but I also found it funny how many times the Blob needed to address what his powers were.
Oh yeah.
Or other people were addressing it, right?
Yeah. It's like, okay, we get it. He can't be moved.
Yeah, to your point before with like the over explaining things, I was laughing earlier today when I was rereading the second issue of where the Blob is like essentially going to land on Colossus and says like, I know how to control my power to land, and he's like, not if I move out of the way, or it was something of that effect, and he's like rolling out of the way.
Yeah, everyone explains what they're doing all the time.
Yeah. I thought that was great.
Because the pictures can't tell it only, right? You need the words and the pictures.
Because John Byrne is like a real rubbish artist, right? Who can't draw a panel that is legible.
He'd never be able to make a character as good as Trevor.
Well, Trent.
Oh, the Trent. Crap, I messed that up already. Darn it.
So can I talk about my I guess joke about the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants really quick?
Let's do it.
So I've always found this kind of funny, where, especially in things like comics, where the bad guys like know they're bad, which doesn't make any sense.
No, they're not going to
feel like modern comics have gotten away from this, where there's more of a blurred line, which is more realistic. Like, Al Qaeda isn't called like bad, the bad Al Qaeda. Like I'm not trying to say anything about them, but like they think they're the good guys. I mean,
but not these guys, not the Brotherhood of Evil.
The Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. They're like, oh, we know we're evil.
Evil, right.
Evil in our name.
Yeah. So like, where does that leave them if they know they're doing the wrong thing?
Yeah.
I understand that like back in the day they had to really differentiate and like say these are the good guys, these are the bad guys. There's no question about who's doing the right thing, who's doing the wrong thing. The villains are villainous, the good guys are righteous.
Am I wrong in my remembering? Didn't in the movies, didn't Magneto just call them the Brotherhood of Mutants? Didn't they remove the word evil in the Ian McKellen?
That might be right. Yeah.
And that's so much more interesting. That like that idea of that Magneto that you see again in more modern stories of like the Magneto was right movement, where it's like you can understand Magneto's point. Maybe he goes about dealing with it in the wrong way, but back in the day, he was just a villain.
Right. Yeah. Gore Vidal says comics at the time, like X-Men, Titans, and Legion of Superheroes, one could jump in completely lost by the story, but the stories, characters, and artwork enhanced and motivated the reader to want more. Yeah, that's kind of what we were saying. Yeah, and Michael Jackson did have an album named Bad. Yes, I agree.
But that was like bad is good. Like,
I think what made the idea for X-Men work was the fact that Magneto wasn't just a mustache twirling villain, which made his crew of evil mutants all the more bizarre. The fact that he would call them evil when clearly Stan Lee was kind of presenting Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and not necessarily saying evil or good in the sense of their thoughts about the problems that the characters were facing. But it's funny that they would label so clearly the henchmen as straight evil.
And I mean, it's something like Batman, I forgive it a little more because most of his villains are certifiably insane. They're psychopaths.
Right.
A psychopath doesn't know the difference between good and evil a lot of times. Whereas a lot of Marvel villains like aren't necessarily crazy like that.
No. Right? Doom is not crazy. Thanos is not crazy.
Right.
They just have a warped sense of
morality and
good they're doing.
Yeah. Or they're blinded by vengeance, or they're blinded by whatever this goal they have, and they're willing to take any means necessary to achieve that because they think it's the right thing to do. Whereas Joker is just a crazy person who wants mayhem. But he doesn't call himself the evil Joker.
So there's a character. So the plot leads us to Senator Kelly, right? He's He's giving this speech, and the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants are planning on killing him. And Kitty Pryde says if they kill him, it's going to set off this timeline that we need to stop. And one of the characters I kind of wanted to discuss is Destiny. And I wanted to kind of see what Justin thought of this character. So for those that don't know, Destiny is part of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and she has the ability to see the future and can use that power to give them a chance to succeed. But she's having some issues with her powers in these two issues. So what did you think of Destiny? Was this the first? I mean, you've seen her in other issues up to now, right?
No, I didn't know. I didn't know Destiny. So that was definitely like, I mean, you know, they did a good job of explaining how she worked. But it, I mean, you know, it made sense in terms of how, you know, she couldn't see clearly this one particular, you know, scene because of some of the changes that were going on. I didn't know much else about her. You know, this is totally jumping forward to House, but I'm glad that I read this now that I've read, you know, House of X, you know, Powers of 10, because, you know, for the reasons of what she does there, that made way more sense now. Cause I'm like, oh, well, I mean, you know, Days kind of introduced that to me. So that was helpful.
Well, and that Mystique Destiny kind of relationship continues into Hickman, obviously, but there's a seed of it here.
Yeah, and it makes sense that like someone who can see the future and then someone who's manipulating the future or the past to change the future, like that would kind of mess with her powers a little bit.
Yeah.
Chet says Bronze Age Bullseye was pretty close to crazy.
Yeah, that's true.
Funny.
Holy crap.
I
also found it very funny that how, like, something that's been going on for so long, like X-Men, and so many writers have had their own takes on the characters and done their own things. And now Hickman has made Moira McTaggart this Omega level mutant who is in this book and probably could have just changed the future by one of her rebirth lives. Spoilers for Powers and House. But back then, like, you know, that wasn't a thing. She was just a person.
I mean, I thought that Hickman did a pretty good job of showing us that she lived several lifetimes trying different things. And so I took it as like, she, you know, by joining Magneto for one's life and, you know, and testing that out, I felt like they explained that like there were opportunities for her to try her best. I don't know that she viewed this particular moment in time as like a turning point, the same way that Kitty Pryde clearly did in traveling back.
Well, I mean, if, you know, time travel is a funny thing and it's impossible. So it is kind of difficult to think about in certain ways. But since this future happened and Kitty went back in time to change that future, then that future would never exist. And so Moira McTaggart would never get to that future to know that she needs to change it in the past.
Well, which is the issue with time, fixing time anyways. Like, how would she come back to fix it if she'd already fixed it? And, you know,
right. How does that work?
The time paradox, right?
Yeah.
This is clearly a Back to the Future and not a Lost universe.
We have to go back to the island.
You were already back. All one time was a flat circle. It's all happening.
Were there any polar bears in this?
There should have been. It would have made everything better.
Counterpoint.
We time travel when we sleep, says Comics Misexplained.
There we go.
Nothing is impossible, says Carlito. Thank you for joining, guys. Nice having you here.
So my argument against time travel is that if time travel ever exists, it will have always existed.
If you believe in that, time is a flat circle, you can't change anything, it's always happening, right?
Right, because if someone went back in time once, then time travel will have always been in existence forever. And it doesn't, so it won't. Got him.
Wow.
Got him.
Unless we can only go forward.
Well, that's not very helpful. But
then that would be somebody else's past, right? This is just deep. We're deep diving here.
Let me add. You mentioned that there's polar bears. There's no polar bears in this, but did you know that you were mentioned in this comic book?
Me or John?
White whale.
Was I?
Yeah, I think it was in the second book.
I missed that.
Let me see. Let me pull it up.
I got it here. Let me.
It was so. Thought I took a screenshot. Hold on. It was in the second book, like page, like maybe 11. Let me jump over to it. Oh no, it was White Wolf. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
When I remember glancing at it, I thought of that when I first saw it. All right, I was close. Anyways.
Maybe I'll change my name.
Yeah, change your name, will you?
It's either Man Wolf or White Wolf,
or Man Frog.
Also good. You know, one thing that I think this comic doesn't get enough credit for, at least this storyline, that a lot of comics kind of blow in certainly in the 90s and later, these covers don't lie. Like this is legitimately a moment. This is legitimately a moment in this comic. Like she's getting the spear right through her. He's getting blasted to skeleton form. Like this legitimately is a moment from the comic. And I think I appreciate the fact that they spoil it so beautifully. I kind of like it.
Yeah, well, it's like a different take on things. It's not like, oh, you're going to be spoiled. It's picking that up and saying, I want to see what leads to this.
Right.
Yeah. Because there's always those covers of like people hooked up to like these crazy things with the stuff pointing at their eyes, or like their terrible goo covering them, or like something just awful, and you're like, oh, how did he get into that situation, or like how is he going to get out? It's
these moments, but or you get these dramatic variants that have nothing to do with the this is the Mary Jane Watson variant,
right?
And
I feel like
Mary Jane holding Thor's hammer for no reason.
Modern covers are pretty, but they don't make you want to read the book. They don't make you want to like open it up and say, oh, I want to see what's happening with this picture.
That's true.
Yeah, I agree that X-Men 96 is now a very challenging book to buy. That's definitely it was, and I waited way too long to get mine. That was a mistake.
Speaking of waiting way too long to get books, really briefly off topic, Star Wars: The Clone Wars 1, the first appearance of Ahsoka Tano. Yeah. I found like 5 copies at work a few months ago, and they were like $100. And I was like, that's too much. I don't want to spend that much on that book. Raw copies are going for $600 to $700 now.
No.
Wow.
Way.
Yep.
Cool guacamole.
Jeez.
Yikes.
So my bad for not buying those when I found them.
Well, if we travel back into time to warn yourself.
Yeah, let me just get in that time machine that doesn't exist.
Bring your consciousness back. I wanted to talk a little bit. I mean, we've mentioned the art, we've mentioned the writing, we mentioned the plot. I want to take a little bit of time to compare it to the film version, which I do like the movie, but having reread this now, they feel even more separate. Like they have some of the same basic tropes or ideas, but they are very different animals.
Haven't seen it. What? Yeah, so I'll let you guys.
Is this where Justin says he hasn't seen it either?
Well, so it's funny when you brought it up before we went live. I've seen it, and it's been a long time, and I really don't remember much about it to be able to compare it.
That probably says something about it. He don't remember it very well.
Yeah,
right.
and I remember thinking the title being a famous title. So when I went and actually when I found out that these books were just 2 issues, I was like, oh wow, they did like this entire movie based on these 2 issues. Like how in depth can this story go or whatever.
Right.
And
yeah, I mean, they obviously made big changes in the sense that like there are certain mutants that don't even show up in the movies because they're only here in this portion, this time at this point in time in the Marvel universe. But in the movies, Rachel Summers they've never brought her in, and Destiny and the evil Brotherhood of Evil Mutants the way they are. In fact, it's just really Magneto as the bad guy with Mystique floating around the background somewhere.
And this is the first appearance of Rachel Summers, right?
Is it?
I think it is, even though it's not like in continuity or timeline.
I'm going to look that up right now. That's a hot take. But like it's Xavier sending Wolverine's consciousness back and using Kitty Pryde as like an intermediary for some of that.
Yeah, because you can't have a movie starring Kitty Pryde. No one wants to see that.
Right? Hot take.
I'm joking. I would totally watch that movie.
I'm saying if they could have done a straight up adaptation, that was kind of my point. Right. I think it would have been just as powerful, if not more. And you are correct. First appearance of a ton of characters. Okay,
Pyro and
first team appearance for the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants with Mystique, Destiny, Pyro, Avalanche, Blob. First appearance of Pyro, Avalanche, Destiny, and Rachel Summers.
Wow.
And then issue 199 was the first appearance of Rachel Summers as the second Phoenix.
Right. But Rachel Summers in this is basically a character that never ends up existing. So a lot of people pick other books as her first appearance because this is like an alternate timeline Rachel Summers.
Curious.
See, I wondered that, and I actually still had that question of when I finished this for the first time. I was left with like a bunch of questions of like, what am I supposed to now expect from the new or from that futuristic world? Was that just a written off one of, or am I, does Clermont revisit this at some point? Again, being newer to the platform in general, I was like, I want to know more. I want to know like what happens there. I mean, I guess they all die and that's it, or Yeah,
it's interesting how they like never at the end they don't really show you what happens in the future.
Right.
You just have to kind of like assume that they fixed things.
Right. And then I thought the next issue was going to tell more. I'm like, oh great, 143, here we go. And then it was Kitty
back to story as normal.
Playing tag around the mansion, yeah.
Right. And Xavier makes some comment about her consciousness coming back and how we will see what happens. Like some veiled idea that like maybe her two consciousness might meld at some point. Like she might have residual memory from this other time. But I don't remember that ever played out. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I don't know.
Empire incoming.
Right. Love the film, but different from the books. I've seen both. The Rogue cut was better. I agree. There's some moments that they had to cut for time. That there's an extended version that includes Rogue because she was, they brought basically everybody back for that film, which was kind of cool. So I do enjoy that film. I do think it's one of the better X-Men movies, but this comic is iconic for a reason. It's because they had great source material to use for that film. So
First Class was good.
Yeah, I liked First Class. I mean, I honestly like most of them, I'm going to say. I mean, most of the Singer ones. Gore Vidal says, we were thinking about Leggett. That's a great reference point. If you guys, that's the short French film that they used for 12 Monkeys, which is a time travel kind of story. And the idea that you can't really change things and that you're stuck in this loop, but that's the opposite kind of time travel. This is a more Back to the Future style that is clearly you can affect change.
Yeah.
But those seem to be the only two versions of time travel I've ever really seen represented, right? You can change things and you can't.
Well,
right.
I mean, it's a 1 and a 0, right? What else is there? Like you can sort of change things. I mean, I get it's like the Simpsons time travel where like, it's the butterfly effect of like he goes back in time and does one thing and then everything changes and he keeps going back in time trying to fix things and then it's not
worth it.
Right. It's more of like a chaos version of this idea where like, yeah, you can go back in time and fix one instance to change the future, but what else changes because of it?
Right, exactly. Chet, I mean, I'm an X-Men purist as well. I still enjoyed the films, but I'm waiting for a definitive adaptation, and I'm hopeful that the MCU can pull that off at some point.
They do kind of like reference what I was just saying, though, at the beginning where Kitty and Colossus are talking, and they say something like, well, what if we aren't able to fall in love because of this?
Yeah.
Which I kind of feel like brings two things up. I wanted to hear what Justin thought about the love story of Colossus and Kitty Pryde, because it's obviously this is when it really comes to fruition, right? What did you think of the story?
So again, kind of just hearing rumors of X-Men, even though I never really followed up until recently, I kind of knew that they had some relationship. Didn't know it was introduced here per se, but yeah, I mean, I like the idea of them. It did come out of nowhere, but you know, I like the idea of it. Or you know, and Alec, to your point of, you know, I did like that they left it open in general of like, who knows, like what could happen? Do things change? Like, and yeah, they never really, you know, give you an answer. I just, you know, I do like that they left that kind of open in the book.
Yeah. And back to my comment about Moira McTaggart earlier, I forgot about Franklin Richards in the book because he's so inconsequential, but he is now in the Marvel Universe like one of the most powerful characters in existence.
Kind of a big deal. Yeah.
And in this book, he's just like, because they hadn't really introduced that idea yet, I don't think.
Right.
He just like died like a chump without doing anything.
And I know that a lot of drama was made out over the years of Colossus being significantly older and her being quite early in her teens when they meet. Yeah. And that maybe this was a slightly inappropriate relationship for a good while.
So that crossed my mind when she said something like, I loved you from the day I met you or the day I knew you or something like that, where I was like, well, technically that's pretty young then.
Yeah, she was like 13, I think.
But yeah. Like it's more okay for her to say that than for him to have said that.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Well, it's not like they're implying that they just, you know, started a relationship then. It obviously took a while for that to happen.
Right.
At least I'm with the hot take on me.
What's that? I love watching Will. Sometimes I think he's frozen, then he blinks, and I'm like, no way. Huh. Yeah. Sorry. It was right here. Peter was 18 and Kitty 13 when they first met. Yeah, there you go. Asimov wrote an interesting time travel novel called The End of Eternity, where humans known as the Eternals travel through time to improve history. So, hey, clearly that's you can affect change storyline.
I have a question about
time travel doesn't exist.
I want to go back for a second and ask about, I was pulling it up here in the first one, I think it's like page 5. Well, so two things I want to touch on. One was the classes of people that they define in the beginning, and it shows like the subways and, you know, Kitty's on her way back with the package or whatever. Was that idea introduced before Clermont stuff of these classes, you know, human, what was the other one? Animalist, human, and then mutant.
Yeah. So first I heard of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't remember it, but I haven't read like every X-Men issue prior to this, but as far as I know, that introduced it.
Okay.
Which relates a little to what Magic Lasso was saying about that graveyard sequence when you see Kitty getting back into the compound, the older Kitty in the future, and she's walking through and you see, you know, almost like Arlington Cemetery, all the gravestones of all these people that have died, which seems funny that the Sentinels would be so sentimental as to like give everyone their headstone.
Is it sentimental, or is it the sort of thing where it's like a reminder that like this is what will happen to you if you disobey us?
Yeah, but wouldn't a giant mass grave do the same? I mean, I don't know. It seemed very like orderly and nice and
organized.
Yeah, it was a little too respectful maybe. But you see like the Fantastic Four and several,
that was a heavy scene. That was a pretty heavy scene to see.
Some Avengers and obviously a bunch of mutants, because there's only 4. They say only 4 mutants left alive, but obviously 4 X-Men left alive. But there are several characters like Magneto who's still alive, who's like he was an X-Men later, like in issue 200. He joined, but leader of the X-Men.
But is he only because they changed the past?
Dun dun dun! I was going to bring that up. Yeah. So he becomes a leader later, but they obviously don't reference it either because they don't count that, or because time has changed,
or also they hadn't written it yet.
Well,
I mean, I forgave the Graves thing because it's the sort of thing where it's like it's a storytelling device where it helps to convey what's happening without them going through like a ton more exposition than they already have. So like,
I wasn't complaining about it.
Yeah. But yes, like in a reality situation, it's super weird.
Yeah.
I dug it a bunch. I thought it was, I mean, obviously Graves. I dug it. I didn't mean that to sound that way. Here's the page. I guess I can make myself a little bigger.
Yeah, this. Yeah, that whole page really, I feel
all
like
the Graves lined up, and
yeah, that explained a lot. I mean, just to give you the idea of how bad it really was there. And again, like I said, if this is the first time that they're introducing the idea of classes of people, you know, I know that idea has been rewritten within the X-Men several times, and you know, really split them apart and categorize them. So I guess that's a pretty big part right there too, just for that.
definitely.
And the other thing I want to mention with this was, I can't think of where the scene was, but I thought it was interesting that they pointed out the idea of not being able to get revenge because these were robotic enemies essentially, and that they had no feeling, and so that therefore it was, you know, I don't know, it's just something that kind of stuck out to me, that that they're in a way they're like, there is no getting a revenge on any person or people's, you know, if there are just these robots that are essentially running the earth or whatever.
Yeah, because we never really see any humans controlling, making decisions for the. We just see the Sentinels out in force.
Right. I mean, I know there's been hands involved with like creating them and stuff, so I guess maybe you could tie it into that, maybe, but they didn't really reference that here.
Yeah, the Sentinels are kind of like self-sufficient, it seems.
Yeah.
This brings up a comment that a thing I wanted to finish out with a little bit here, which is the idea of what would you do to improve or build on this? Because I definitely feel what Magic Lasso is feeling here, which is I could have used at least another issue or two, but is that going the wrong direction? Should we leave well enough alone? What changes could you conceive of?
Personally, like I wouldn't change anything, but I feel like if you did stretch this out to 3, 4, even 6 issues, because there's just so much packed into these, that if you like paced it a little more, I think there would be like more impactful moments. But I mean, I don't think it needs it per se, but I think like the idea is bigger than 2 issues.
Yeah, totally. I agree with that. And I think if there's one of the things that stands out to me, I guess, I mean, there's several things that I think they could have elaborated on in a good way, or, you know, in a way to make it work. I would like to kind of see maybe brief flashbacks of how this futuristic world actually came to be. I mean, they you know, verbally explain some things, but like maybe to really show some of, maybe, I don't know, some epic battles that, you know, the Avengers were actually involved in, or you know, again, I mean, that certainly could go down a very deep storyline, you know, if you really wanted to consider that, but you know, just to give a little bit more to have it hit home for just how bad it really was, or how it got that way, could, you know. But I mean, I agree. I don't think it needed anything per se.
Well, I mean, I don't know that. I know that the movie added a bunch more with Bolivar Trask and having the creator of the Sentinels and using that as part of the story as well. And I feel like I could really use. I wanted to see the humans on the other side sending the Sentinels and the evil force maybe that the mutants in the future were battling. Some of that I think would have been fun to see. I think it would have added some impact. But I think Alec mentioned earlier that like the future story just kind of stops at one point, and you just don't get any more of it. And I think the future characters even say like, we don't know if we're just gonna vanish and it's all over, or if we're just going to keep going, never knowing, because our timeline will keep going, but they're creating an alternate timeline where they can all be happy.
Right. Yeah.
Gore says, it's incredible how much Byrne could pack onto a page. It's only 2 issues, yet in retrospect, it always seems like more and much longer to me. It's the same with Perez on Teen Titans. I agree with that. Chet says, I wish they ran with the source material rather than what we got. The graveyard page, Wolverine dying, the Colossus, then Storm. What we got was just okay, but missed the mark. Well, that's what happens when you have a star like Hugh Jackman. You put him in the centerpiece. You don't bring in another character and put him in the background. That's the drawback of modern movies. You know.
So for the ending of this, I want to make sure I understand it right. That, you know, essentially, as everything ends, and they're left with like the president at the very end, and Shaw's there, and Senator Kelly's there, and they're meeting for like that final time, and then they introduce, oh man, I can't think of the guy's name at the very like last 2 pages or whatever. Is that hinting that essentially? Yeah. Is that hinting that they're essentially still going to move forward with, you know, the plans? I mean, like that basically it didn't work, even though they saved Senator Kelly then. You know, is that? I didn't really read on. I mean, like I said, I finished after the following issue.
I've always taken it as sort of thing where it's like there's always going to be hatred, and there's always going to be someone trying to kind of like restrict the minority out of fear. Not necessarily that the exact same thing is going to happen, but that just like fixing one issue in one moment isn't going to change the fact that like hate and prejudice still exist. But maybe I'm reading too much into it.
Right. No. I mean, that definitely crossed my mind, and especially thinking about the current stuff. You know, you guys mentioned Moira and what she's done with changing the past over and over, or reliving these lives, and just kind of seeing that things for a majority of times still didn't pan out the way that, you know, even though she had new information and was bringing new stuff, you know, there was still this hatred. There was still this, this way of let's remove mutants. Let's, just the violence and wanting to get rid of certain people that always stood around no matter what she did or no matter what, you know, she tried to help with. So I just thought that was interesting. And then maybe if Hickman tied that, thought of that as reading stuff like this. Or,
well, because I mean, it plays into a little bit of what Hickman was doing too, where it was like, can we destroy the mega mold, the important Sentinel, or is it just going to lead to more reprisals and more Sentinels? And is there a solution somewhere in that? Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Obviously, I'm getting, and I'm going to keep reading this omnibus wise or whatever. I'm going to go back and try to restart where I left off my Clermont run. I'm assuming at some point, Justin, you're going to pick up where you left off and continue on.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Alec, how much of the Byrne Clermont have you read the whole thing in entirety at some point, or?
I don't think I've read the whole thing, no. But I've read, I read Phoenix arc, and I've read this, and so to go back and read the whole thing, no, I probably will someday, but I've got so many damn comics to read. I haven't.
I was going to say, if you get a chance, Alec, I would definitely check out, if you get whenever you get the time, if you can get through 96, through the Byrne stuff again. I know, if you read the Dark Saga, you can kind of skip that over maybe, or reread it. But I think there are some gems in there with the early 100s, actually 98, 99. I loved issues 111 to 113, and then the Proteus stuff, 125 to 128 or something like that. Some really, really good story arcs there. And I was talking to some of the guys in the chat earlier about this. And I feel like if I never read this, no one ever really talks about some of these other little parts of the stories, but there's some really good stuff.
Yeah.
Definitely. Shout out to Drew Manchu. He's in the chat. I'm going to drop the link for Alex T Public because he's got some pretty sweet shirts over there, and he's adding more and more. And you guys should check it out. So that's the link right there. I want to make sure that everybody who's hanging out, 15 of you in the chat and people watching on the rewind should check it out. Yes, Drew. Great story. Hickman is, I don't know about God, but I will give Byrne a GAWD. And goddamn, Clermont. There you go. Thanks for coming by, Drew. I guess that's kind of it. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to discuss about it? I feel like we kind of hit a little bit of everything.
It's a great little.
Thanks, Chet.
Two book gem.
Yeah. Along with the tragedies in the lives of X-Men, so Charles was being realistic about the future. So Justin has a YouTube channel, an Instagram. I put the link to the YouTube channel down below. You can find him under KnowGoodComics pretty much all across social media. Do you have anything coming up you want to hype or anything you've dropped recently you want to let people to look for?
I mean, I do shows on Saturdays at 2:00 Eastern time on Instagram. I've been doing a lot more of Instagram, certainly more of my home than YouTube, although I am trying to get more content on YouTube now. But it's a lot of fun. Every Friday I put on my story, I'll put like a hot topic question about comics, and people can leave their answers, and then I actually go over the answers on Saturday afternoon at 2:00, and brings up some really cool discussions. And then I'll occasionally open up a box if I have a box here, which my girlfriend's like, "How many boxes you ordering here?" There's a lot of things coming in. So a lot of
let's see that book you opened up today.
When you win a bunch of raffles, it's
I'll throw it up one last time. So my message for anybody going after anything, raffle wise, I'll just say, never give up, and don't be a quitter. Do not be a quitter.
I never looked at not participating in a raffle as being a quitter until now. And then, so Alec, what do you got coming up that people should be aware
of? Maybe D&D on Sunday. We're waiting on one person who may not have internet this weekend. Otherwise, next week on Book Club, back on my channel, we'll talk about that in a second. And then on the 13th, I'm defending my Comic Stories Championship on Boyo at 7's channel.
Ooh, that's right.
Yeah, if you missed the champion here coming out on Monday, you got to go back and watch the Boyo at 7's channel and see that Comic Stories showdown, because Alec threw down some thunder, man. It was worth seeing.
It was epic.
So hopefully D&D Sunday. Next week, we are going to be reading the new Deceased Dead
so
Planet
excited.
Issue number 1. We read Deceased number 1 last time, and it did not go well. We are
my favorite book of all time.
Yeah. We're still complaining about Deceased issue 1. I've gone since then and read the entire Deceased, and still have some hot takes on that story and my issues that I have both with the writing, but specifically with the art more than anything.
Tacoma Comics brings up a question that I was going to talk about.
We could definitely get to that. We're going to have guests, though. We got Mr. Drew Manchu, Bebe. And we're going to have Perry Comics joining us. These guys really love that Deceased, and they're picking up Deceased Dead Planet issue 1. So we're going to have a little tete-a-tete on that one, discussing it, breaking it down.
And let me say, I'm going into this with an open mind. I'm not taking my dislike for the first Deceased into this. I'm going to read it as its own thing and then tell you it's a garbage fire.
Right. That's the good plan. That's a good way to do it. So Tacoma was saying, did you talk about Wolverine peeing on the elevator? I'm going to let Alec take care of that one. He's in charge of the wang.
So there's this one panel where Wolverine has this laser that comes out of his belt buckle that happens to be yellow, and it's a very small panel, and it looks like he's just peeing in a very straight line.
Right.
Strange choice.
Could have gone with a different color, right?
Absolutely. Blue. Or have it come out of his watch.
I was thinking purple, but yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, out of his watch. He had to. I don't know if he wears a watch.
When I read this digitally, and I have this setting to like panel to panel, as you swipe, instead of seeing the whole page. So when that panel hit my screen for the first time, I certainly was wondering what was happening before I even got to the words or anything, and was just like, did I get? Is there a glitch within the visual stuff?
Glitch in the Matrix now.
Yeah,
that's the first thing out of Tacoma's mind. Let's talk about peeing in the elevator. Yeah, got to go there. Other than that, the only show I know for sure I'm doing in the next few days is Friday night. I'm doing another breakdown of The Wire. Fire Guy Ryan and Stay Puff are joining us again, and we're going to be talking. Last time we talked about the theme of corruption, and this time we're talking about the theme of addiction, and sort of the two of those are hugely important on that series. So if you like The Wire and you just want to hear some great Wire discussions, we're going to be breaking down characters, breaking down story arcs, and certainly looking at the theme of addiction and why it's so vitally important for that series. So that's Friday night. other than that, that's pretty much it. Make sure if you're picking up Deceased next week, you come by and hang out and talk with us about it, because that's our plan. I think that book drops because DC's dropping on Tuesdays now.
Tuesdays, yep.
You can snag it Tuesday or Wednesday, read it up, join us, and we'll completely lay into it.
Or who knows? Maybe we'll love it.
But laying into it doesn't necessarily mean good or bad, right? Doesn't it? It just means getting into the meat of it.
As Carlito said, nothing's impossible.
Right. Hello, Geek Aficionado. Yeah, we're finishing up. I feel like I just have to just make sure I didn't miss it. We are here Tacoma, but we're also leaving. So thank you all for coming. Huge thanks to Justin for joining us for this.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it. I love what you guys do, your platforms, and just what you guys do in the community. I know you guys are everywhere and putting your time into the content you put in. So, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
And definitely click on the link in the description below to check out Justin's channel as well. All right. Thanks for coming, everybody. And he's got his ocean thing, but I'm just going to say goodbye.
That's not my channel.
Yeah, right.